Thank you so much for tuning into my show, William Wallace for America. With me today is United States Senate candidate Eric Skrmetta. Eric, thank you so much for being on there. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Bill. Glad to be here.
Well, I tell you what, this is going to be something I think that everyone is going to enjoy in Louisiana because you're running in Louisiana. But on a nationwide level, I think there's going to be other states that look at this video and go, I wish I had a candidate like that in my state.
Well, I'm glad, and I hope they do wish that, because I think there's a lot to be learned from Louisiana politics, and I think that people are looking at Louisiana anyway because of the strength of the state nationally between Speaker Johnson and Majority Leader Scalise and the rest of the delegation. The Republican delegation, leads the way. Congressman Higgins, Congresswoman Letlow, they are making a real imprint in Washington, and I think Louisiana is recognized for that.
You just named a bunch of really conservative names and a lot of really strong people in our country. Do you see yourself really being able to form a team with these guys in the Senate?
Look, the one I'm super looking forward to forming a team with is Senator Kennedy. Senator Kennedy is he's a brilliant scholar, and he's a lot of fun too. I know everybody loves him for the gamesmanship he brings to the microphone, but the ones who make the mistake are the ones who overlook his genius, because he's a really very, very, very bright man, and I love it when people underestimate their opponents. And so I think a lot of people underestimate him sometimes until they're sitting in the witness seat in the hearings, and then all of a sudden, I think they figure out real quick that they've made a mistake. So I'm looking forward to working not only with Senator Kennedy, but also there are members of a variety of positions, both in the House and the Senate, of people I've worked with for the last 17 years as commissioner in helping to formulate federal policy and ideas around energy and electricity, as well as pipeline issues. And I think we can make a big difference in helping to drive not just Louisiana, but America into a dominant energy position in the world.
So you have a unique position right now that I think is going to make you more uniquely qualified when you, as a senator, you're talking about your public service commissioner role and how much work you've done with energy on a federal level. Is that what I heard correctly?
Correct. As a member of the board of directors of the National Association of Regulatory and Utility Commissioners, we spend an enormous amount of time talking amongst national influences about energy, predominantly about electrical generation, whether it be natural gas or coal or nuclear, but also looking at how the renewable energy generation system has really impeded stability in our system. And we've spent about $1 trillion over the last 10 years or so on renewable energy, and it has put us in a position where we are behind the curve on electrical generation. So we really have to double the amount of electrical generation, baseload power, meaning power coming from natural gas, nuclear. It's going to be tough to build new coal plants, but we've got to renovate our existing coal fleet and try to keep it going as long as we can, and when possible, find ways to improve coal for the future. We spend an enormous amount of time in the national level talking about pipeline system, gas pipeline in particular, about moving natural gas through a lot of states. There are some states who have not approved pipeline systems for 30 years. Some of them never approved pipeline systems. And that's a real issue that has to be looked at by the Congress to help the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, be able to make decisions that move things through the regulatory process more quickly to help the country build out pipelines. Because there are states that are going to be running out of the ability to run their coal units. And if they don't have pipelines to move natural gas to them to build natural gas plants, and then they're going to have nuclear plants, well, we got to fix the nuclear process of regulatory through congressional action. We've got to find ways so the country can power itself. And I believe that what I bring to the equation on this is I can be the most effective senator with a goal of establishing the dominance of our country in energy, whether it be oil, whether it be gas, whether it be hydro, whatever the aspect is, because I recognize that electricity and fuels drive economies. And when we want to drive our economy, we need to power factories and we want to power manufacturing facilities. And all those things create jobs. And what we want are having places for people to have employment. And in order to do that, they have to have base load power. And it's going to be easy to do feel-good legislation. But one of the things I'm not going to be shy about is to be a continual producer of legislation in the Senate on all aspects of building out the energy systems of our country.
This is really interesting because you come from a unique position, like I was saying a few minutes ago, as Public Service Commissioner, where you worked on the rules and laws of power, not only in Louisiana, but how it connects to America. So you see it differently. You're just not there saying, we need more oil and gas. You're saying, not only do we need more oil and gas and more energy because it's our of course, powers our country in many ways more than just lights and cars.
Sure.
But you see it from a perspective of policy, not only or need and policy, and you're able to connect it to other things because as a senator, you're not just going to be doing things on energy. You're going to be rules and laws on all kinds of things, but they're all connected to the prosperity of this nation, which goes back to energy.
Right. Well, you have to look at what drives the economy, right? And we're looking at that right now with the president's call to action about America being in the AI race, in the data processing race against China, against Russia, against all foreign, not friendly countries that are trying to outperform us in artificial intelligence development. Well, artificial intelligence basically consumes enormous amounts of electricity. And the president has rightly identified the fact that we need to double the amount of generation to do this. And right now in Louisiana, we are formulating the largest artificial intelligence facility in the world in Richland Parish. And that is going to be produced by Meta. And it is in its early stages, but it's going to be the size of the island of Manhattan. They are paying for their own generation that is going to be built by one of our utilities, Entergy. It is not going to be an impact on our regular consumers. There are other states that are not approaching it with that directive. And so that is putting a burden on their regular citizens. But we have led the way to make it to where we have understood that if you want to do this and you want to come to our state, then you have the money and you have to make the commitment, the long-term commitment and obligation to pay for these systems. And if you do that, not only are we going to work to approve it, but we're going to do it in a very rapid regulatory approval mechanism, demonstrating to the federal government that the federal government can move more rapidly on approval. I have said before in public forums that the federal government, a lot of the things that are impeded by building out our economy is the fact that federal permitting across the spectrum, whether it's an EPA permit or a FERC permit or any kind of permit you can imagine on the federal level, takes a lot of time to get because the deep state element on permitting looks for ways to not issue the permit, right? The federal permitting system largely is about impeding issuance of a permit. I have publicly said that all federal permits should come in a vending machine. You should go, you should put your money up, you should get your permit. And then the states build everything. They build pipelines, they build generators, they build dams, they build every aspect of everything is built by the states as far as infrastructure. The federal government provides capital, it provides oversight. And what the federal government should do with its offices is it should ride herd on it. It should focus on, are the people who have engaged in these processes following the federal rules? And if they're not, well, then they should be punished. They should be fined. they should be impeded then.
I like this approach, not to interrupt you,
That's okay.
but what's interesting is, and I want to highlight this, underline it right now, is when you talk about permitting, and right now I believe that one of the biggest infringements on our personal liberties starts at our state level, that the federal government has pierced the 10th Amendment veil by creating all these bureaucracies and agencies, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but you see this.
You need to read my book.
Yeah. we're going to talk about your book here in a second, but they've taken, you basically have to go to the government, and the bureaucracies have gotten so large and so regulatory, and they end up being controlled by whatever administration is in office. And if it's a liberal Democrat administration, a company might, with a great permitting or great need for a permit, might get held up 4 or 5 years. So basically, your way is saying through deregulation, you can.
It's not even deregulation, and I think the president said it well. It's about re-regulation, right? We want there to be an effective regulatory mechanism that does not impede the development of an economy, right?
Right.
And so remember that federalism, and you talk about the 10th Amendment, but the 10th Amendment is reserving whatever's not specifically in the Constitution that the public granted the government to have specific powers about in the Constitution, right? We're not talking about the CFR, we're not talking about developed rules, we're talking about in the Constitution. All the rights that are not specifically delegated are delegated to the states or to the citizens, right? So I have my rights, and my rights were not given to me by government. God gave me my rights.
That's right.
The king didn't give me my rights. It's specifically spelled out in the Declaration that my rights were given to me by my Creator, right? So people have lost track of the fact that the federal government is not the nanny, right? That we control the government does not control us. I know that's the big fight, right? But what I've seen is the expansion of anti-federalism through the federal process. And a lot of people get confused about that, because you think about federalism, people say, well, that's the federal government being bad. No. Federalism is about the individual states retaining their rights and preserving the rights of the individual. Mm-hmm. It's the sort of counterintuitive language, right?
Okay, yeah.
Some people think about federalism, they ought to be thinking states' rights, because it's an easier way to do it, right? But everybody thinks, oh, states' rights, that's a bad thing. No, it's about preserving our rights under the Constitution, under Article 10, right? So, when we think about that, we want to make sure that what can we do to constrain the federal government to its effective, limited powers? And I think the president has been given great guidance, whoever is running his peripheral advice section,
right.
Because, I don't know about you, but I sit around and I meet with people in coffee shops, and I meet with people for breakfast, and I go talk to people at meetings, and we sit around, particularly amongst the conservatives, because the liberals who meet with me, they really don't like it when we talk about this. But when we talk about various things, we talk about immigration, we talk about the Second Amendment, we talk about tariffs, we talk about the economy, the debt, everything. Everything we talk about things that we believe are necessary to improve our nation's status, our nation's ability to be creative, the president's really on target doing them. I think pretty soon we're going to have to sit around and start thinking up new stuff.
Right.
Because he's really doing it. And in fact, when I was doing the outline for my book, I was outlining all the different subjects I was going to do. And I'm like having to delete subjects because I'm like, he's already did it.
So what subjects made the book?
Oh, all kinds of stuff. But, I mean, look, my book is broken out into the history of conservatism, from Edwin Burke to Cicero. It's going to be a treatise on everybody's going to go, oh, I really don't want to read this, because it's going to be like going back to school. But you know what? If you decide to read the book, it's going to take you through the early developmental elements of conservatism.
Right.
Who really started this, and showing that conservatism is a thoughtful process of slow modification of society. Because people who knee-jerk and jump the gun are the ones who cause the problem. So Edmund Burke saw that. It was an issue associative with the French Revolution. The revolution jumped the gun. The church came back and helped modify it, both in Germany and in France. We look at that. We look at Cicero. We look at, but we move into the modern times and we talk about the early Republican Party. We look at Goldwater. We look at the Buckleys, and we look at the modification of that. We look at Reagan heavily in the book, and I look at how Trump has sort of taken all aspects of the history of federalism, the history of conservatism, and he has taken the complexity of what I would call pretty serious intellectual study, and he has brought it into a blender and made it to where everybody can understand it. And he is you could say, we used to say Reagan was the great communicator, and he was. But when Ronald Reagan spoke, and I got to meet Reagan several times. In fact, I have a photograph of my mom and dad with Ronald Reagan on the wall. But Ronald Reagan was so smooth and so well done about this. Where Donald Trump, the differential for me is, I think Donald Trump even more so understands the middle income of America. And he understands what people have, because unlike, President Reagan, Donald Trump, through being a builder, of someone who built businesses, he actually worked with people that he had to hire.
Right.
And I went through the same process with my dad and our businesses, where I had to work with the crews, and I had to get out there and stack boxes. I learned how to weld, and I learned how to run a lathe.
From the bottom up.
This is before I went to high school. I learned how to do this, right? But I would work with the crews, and you learned how to work with individuals. But not just that, you learn by engaging with the people who are literally living paycheck to paycheck about what their issues are and about what their biggest problems are. And you understand that. So you're not insensitive to the fact of what's necessary. So when I'm sitting here as a commissioner, right, and I'm looking forward to being a United States Senator, I'm not looking at, what can I do to shift the dynamics, or where can I move the axis of the earth? I'm looking at, what can I do to increase the child credit? What can I do to increase that to a point where, 80% of the people in Louisiana make $120,000 more or less. Why can't I improve that child credit to where most people in the state don't have to pay a federal tax if they make less than $120,000 a year, because the tariff system can be coming forward to offset that with traditional tariff-based income associated with that. Because if we look at the tariff mechanism, you think about how much we really import in this country is largely never more than about 10% of our GDP.
So are you a tariff person?
Absolutely. I think I'm a balanced, fair trade tariff person. And I'm going to give you the weirdo economics analysis of this, right? And don't quote me on weirdo economics. I don't want to be voodoo economics, right?
But not voodoo economics. But weirdo economics is okay, but not voodoo.
But look, the United States continues to have average growth of about 4% when things are going okay. When Biden was in office, he claimed that we would have growth at about 1.5% of our economy. Well, that underscored the need to raise taxes. Because if you fudge the numbers and you say, well, we're only going to grow at 1.5%, we've got problems, we're going to do this. Well, that's not reality. Reality is we grow at 4%. If we grow at 4%, and I know the president's at 15% on this tariff basis, if the president sees it working at 15 and they can nudge it to around 20%,
right.
At 20%, if we can get north of 4% with growth by encouraging people to jump the tariff, to build factories in the United States. But if we can get north of that, if we could drop our imports down a little bit, like 9%, and we can get our tariff level up to about 20%, we have a chance of cutting the time period of reducing our debt in half. Now, normally, if we look at where we are, if we went into stasis
You
right
mean at
now,
$37 trillion of debt?
right now, if we were like we're now, I did the math on this, we're like 63 years right now to solve the debt. If we wanted to solve the debt, right? We don't have to solve the complete debt. What we have to do is get our hands and slow it down or reduce it, right?
Right.
But in 30 years, if we continued better growth, if we continued more development of industry, and we managed the tariffs right, we could cut that period in half.
Wow.
That makes a big difference on increasing the value of the dollar. Because when we increase the value of the dollar, a lot of people say, well, it makes our exports more difficult to do. Yeah, okay, right? I'm fine with that because it helps us. Now, the president's moves on energy right now are great because he made a deal with Europe. We're right now in this cycle with Europe, $750 billion in energy, which means natural gas mostly, and it's coming from Louisiana, all right? So
right.
we know where we're getting it from, right? It's going out of Plaquemine and Chenier, right? So we know what's going to happen. But I really feel like the president's movement on tariffs, if he and he's getting great advice, if we can only get the Federal Reserve to pay attention to the reduction in inflation, and we could kick it down a little bit, you'll see a bloom in housing developments. You'll see people buying houses. You'll see buying cars. And also, the thing about cars, the president, when he changed the CAFE standards to zero, I don't know if you knew about the CAFE standards.
I'm not completely up on it. I'll let you explain.
Well, the CAFE standards are the standards established for exhaust on and to set mileage limits on vehicles manufactured in the United States. So when the Democrats controlled, they would establish a multiplying factor.
Right.
Okay? So the president can't get Congress to eliminate the CAFE standards. But what he could do, as part of the budget, he could change the factor. So he changed the multiplier to zero. So what's 1 times 0?
0.
That's what it is. So all of the mileage standards on U.S. manufactured vehicles are now gone. So instead of having to build out a bunch of high mileage vehicles and not build pickup trucks and Suburbans and like low mileage vehicles that people want, now they can do that. And you're going to start seeing fewer battery powered vehicles being made, like on the traditional GM systems. And
well, now we're already finding out that electrical vehicles are going to be a thing of the past. We talk here about hydrogen cars, we have hydrogen, these new batteries that run on water.
Right. Now, I think you're going to find that there is always going to be a section of society that wants something along that line. So I do think you're going to find, particularly people are going to, the water will calm, and people are going to like the Teslas, and they're going to like the vehicles that use hydrogen because they don't have batteries in them. The electric hydroelectric drives. Right. But there are people also recognize that if they want to pull a trailer, they need a pickup truck. Right. They want to do something, they need something else. But the price of Suburbans right now is outrageous. Like a Chevy Suburban, for example, is like a decked out one's like $80,000-$90,000.
Wow.
Right? Because they don't make that many of them. Because they shifted the production line over to more electric vehicles. But as the production line reduces the amount of electric vehicles and they start producing more, it'll be supply and demand, and the price should drop on the more vehicles. And they'll be able to get it. So a lot of times people are sitting there going, I wish I could have a muscle car again. Well, guess what? My guess is within a year, you'll be able to buy a muscle car. Right?
So let's talk about some things, fun things other than cars. I love this.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about, with as a senator, a lot of people in Louisiana are looking to other candidates. We've got several other candidates have jumped in, and I could go through those candidates, but I'm not right now. But what I want to do is reflect how you, Eric Skrmetta, is somebody that is different from all of those people, and how you're different. And because you're obviously you're new to the race, you're definitely not new to politics. You've been involved in the state for a long time. I want to go through some of your credentials as a conservative, as a Republican, and then I want to go through some issues on how you would vote on things that reflect, we'll start at the top: First Amendment, Second Amendment,
Okay.
growth of government.
Well,
So as a conservative Republican in Louisiana, how have you been involved?
well, I'll tell you how it started. Okay. Um, and I'm going to be like a guy on Fox News, and I covered this in my book.
Okay.
When I was a kid, everybody in New Orleans was a Democrat. Everybody in Louisiana was a Democrat. But they were blue dog Democrats. They were conservatives, right? And my mom and dad were Democrats their entire life. But my mom and dad were conservative. My dad was in the Army Air Corps, in World War II. I mean, my mom and my dad worked together their whole life, right? And when I was growing up, my siblings were, the minimum sibling was 10 and a half years older than me. So when I grew up, they were adults. They had gone to college, they were doing their thing, and I was home by myself. So that's why when I was a young student, a lot of times I would be at my dad's office with my mom, was his bookkeeper. So they were there all the time together. The offices were next door to each other.
Right.
Their intercom was yelling at each other, right? So, I'm not kidding about that. So, but I worked in the machine shop as a kid. I stacked cases of product. I just would do that. But I watched my dad, and you learn by example, right? And look, I was fortunate enough to have a father that was an integral part of my life and my family. I had a nuclear family, my mom and my dad, right? And I learned from them, right? And so, but my dad and my mom would talk about politics. My dad would talk about it a lot with his friends, because I'd go to eat lunch with him and his business guys, and I'd just sit there and listen. My dad used to tell me, you can learn a lot if you just sit there and open your ears. And so I would just sit there and listen, right? All these old guys would sit around, and these were guys who fought at Normandy, and these are guys. These are guys who were really busy guys. My dad was designed for the Pacific, but he had guys who he knew from all over the place, right? But I listened to them, and these guys were not talking about transgenderism, and these guys were talking about how we're going to build an economy, what are we going to do, and they were talking about things, and even my grandfather, who was a immigrant, was an ardent conservative, even though he was a Democrat.
And conservative has nothing to do with being a Republican.
Yeah.
Conservative is just a way of life, being frugal, being responsible.
100%. 100%. And, my grandfather was, I'll tell you, but I remember the earliest story I remember about people being anti-tax was my grandfather. Because when they came out with federal withholding tax, my grandfather was furious about that. And he wasn't furious about it for him. He was furious that they were taking money out of people's paychecks and withholding it from him. But he says, those people earn that money. And he got mad about it. And he had to fight with the federal government, from what I understand, before I was born, about this. And he ended up complying, but it was like a really big problem, right? So, so I remember I was coming on to being 18 years old, and it was the days of Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House, big Tip, right?
Wow.
And watching it on television about him arguing with Ronald Reagan and campaign time, even before when Reagan ran the first time, if you remember, and he didn't win, but these big arguments, and so I was talking to some friends of mine that I knew, and they were like, well, I'm going to go register to vote. And I was going to register to vote. I was in college, because I went to college when I was 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so I became 18 years old in college. And when I was 18, I remembered somebody said, what are you going to do? And I said, I guess I got to register as a Democrat. And they went, no, you don't. And I went, I don't? Because I didn't know. I was in New Orleans, right? And, I grew up on a street where the future mayor of New Orleans, Mark Morial, lived 5 houses down the street from me. We played on the same Nord football team together. I lived in a mixed neighborhood. I had no idea about the Republican Party at that time, other than I watched it on television. It was a very foreign concept to me, but I liked it. And so he says, no, you can register as Republican. I went to go register to vote in New Orleans, and I said, I want to register as Republican. And the lady said, you can't do it. I said, oh, I thought I could. She goes, well, you can, but why would you do that? because you can't vote for anything.
So she was already trying to manipulate back then.
They gave me the song and dance that I couldn't do it, right? I said, well, then I guess I won't be voting for anything, but I'm going to do it, right? So I became a Republican because I couldn't stand the concepts and philosophy of Tip O'Neill. He was the guy who did it for me. Tip O'Neill sold me on the Republican Party, right? It's amazing how Democratic speakers of the House can get Republicans to become Republican voters.
Well, because sometimes, as we're seeing in the world today, the opposites are so opposite. The choices are clear.
Well,
and right now, ideologies have taken over the Democrat Party in such a way. It's funny, the Republicans used to be seen as extremists, and because they believe in less government. And now that the Democrats have gone in a completely another direction, the Republican Party hasn't moved. The Democrat Party's moved so far away from it. The Republicans don't look as crazy as it used to be because they're like, wait a minute, that's the people that have more common sense now.
Well, I'll tell you that you're right, and the world has shifted on its axis only by name, right? Because the people and how they feel is the same. It's just the labels have changed, right? But so I'll continue. So I started becoming active in politics when I was in high school. Before I could even do anything, I was on Students for Nixon, because I even have a thing over there. I have an autograph of Richard Nixon on a event that I got to go to.
I love it.
But when I went to college, I became involved through someone asking me to help Jimmy Fitzmaurice, who at the time was a very conservative Democrat, right? And my father knew him from New Orleans, and my dad said, well, why don't you go help Mr. Fitzmaurice? He was running for governor. So I became involved in the Fitzmaurice campaign, and on a favorable basis, but I admired, at that point, Congressman Training, watching him. And so when things went haywire in the election, and it was disrupted, and Mr. Fitzmaurice told all of us, I want you all to go and work to elect Dave Train. And I was like, let's go. So we went to work, we elected Dave Train, and I asked then Governor Train-elect, I said, may I come and work for you? And he said, yes. And so I went to work on the 4th floor as a staffer. I was basically the guy who picked up heavy things and put down everything. But actually, because
the assistant to the assistant.
I was beyond that. But that was the first time that when I got there, it was all typewriters, and then they got the first linear word processor, and nobody knew what to do. But I had been taking computer stuff at LSU, so they said, do you think you can put it together? And I went, give it a try.
Yeah.
So I did, and I set up the systems. But it was even more interesting than that. Was I got to work directly for the executive secretary, who was Bill Nungesser's father, Big Bill.
Yeah.
And he was my direct supervisor. And so they walked me over to a wall in the 4th floor office. It was as big as this bookshelf, and it was an armoire, and they opened it up, and I'll never forget this. And it was all just stacks of single letter paper, just stacks of it.
Yeah.
It was probably 10,000 pages. And I said, what's that? And they said, these are complaint letters that Governor Edwards never forwarded to the right department. And I went, oh, what do you want me to do? So they asked me to develop a system of looking at all these letters and then figuring out how to put it on the word processor to write letters to the right departments, to forward them to the right department, say, please take care of this, which is a lot like what I do now, right? So, so what old is new again, right? So anyway, but I went from there, and I talked to Governor Treen at that time, and I was working for my dad during the weekends and stuff at home. And at that point, I recognized that my future was going to have to be different from my family business. I had 2 older brothers that were really working in the business.
Right.
And I recognized that if I wanted to go somewhere and be successful, I didn't want to be doing that.
Right.
So I talked to them about going to law school, and they encouraged me to go. So got a letter of recommendation, took the LSAT, and eventually went to law school.
Right.
Right. So went to law school, finished up, and 2 days before I graduated from law school, my eldest brother was killed in a car wreck.
Mm.
And I had been accepted to go and get my master's in law from Oxford University, Harvard, Georgetown, GWU, and Tulane. And I had already accepted to go to one of the other schools outside of the state. My dad asked me not to leave because my mother was very upset. So I decided to go to Tulane. So I went to Tulane, got my master's in maritime law, and began practicing law immediately. In fact, I got I think my admission's up on the wall. I think it was October 17th of 1985. So this year in October it'll be 40 years that I've been practicing law. And I went to bed the night after I got sworn into the bar, and I got woken up at 4 in the morning by one of my cousins who got arrested in New Orleans with 30 students from Millsaps College who got arrested for singing hymns on Bourbon Street. And the poor lady deputy down at Central Lockup told me to come get these children out of jail. So my first thing, my ink wasn't dry on my license, was I had to go call the duty judge at 4 in the morning and tell him what was up. And by the time I got down there, it took them 4 hours to process everybody out.
Oh, gosh.
And I got them to drop the charges, but the city made me get everybody to agree to a hold harmless against the city for them suing them.
This is like that movie. What's the new attorney?
You mean Cousin Vinny?
Yeah, Cousin Vinny.
Yeah, a little bit, but nobody died. So anyway,
yeah.
So I practiced law for a number of years, did some business deals, and eventually got involved in local politics, helped out people, and I ran for state House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. In my district here, I ran in 2000, and I did not win. There were 13 people in that race.
Wow. Wow.
And I came in fourth. And actually, it was just one of those things where when you got that many people, your Christmas card list got you elected.
Right.
So Jennifer Hebe was elected. And, we're still, and the funny part is, I'm still friends with everybody who was in that race, right? And then I ran again after that, one more time, and I came in third. There were only 9 people in that race.
You're moving up.
So I was moving up, right? So, but I got involved and I ran for the parish executive committee and I got elected. I was on that for a number of years.
Right.
And eventually I got off of it because I realized I was taking up a space for that. But I'm also on the state central committee and I've been on that for a number of years and I like to participate on that and be helpful. But, I got a call and someone asked me, would you like to represent us and run for Public Service Commission? It was one of the local Republicans here and I went, yeah, I would. I thought about it, and I said, I'll do it. And so I went, qualified, and that was, I think, 7 candidates, and I came out swinging hard, and
there you go.
I won. And
you went from 20 to 9 to 7 to 1.
Well, to 1, and I won. And since then, I've won 3 times. So I'm finishing my 3rd term, which is, we're term limited, so this is it. And, so that's really the extent of that. Now, where I am now, I'm on the board of directors of the National Association. I'm vice chairman of the Public Service Commission now. I've been chairman of the Public Service Commission 3 times. Been vice chairman 4 times.
National.
No, the State Public Service Commission. I've been the chairman. I've been vice chairman.
But you said the
national. Yeah, and I'm on that board. I'm also the vice chairman of the subcommittee on nuclear energy. I'm on the pipeline safety subcommittee. I'm on the National Gas Infrastructure Task Force. I'm on the Nuclear Energy Partnership. There's a long list of things I get involved with in this.
And then you were chairman of the Trump campaign.
I was chairman of the Trump campaign when it was me and Donald Trump in the back room of the River Center in Baton Rouge, and it was just us. And this is before he got the nomination.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you an interesting story about Louisiana's impact on that first race. But once he got the nomination, he had a lot more friends.
Yeah, right.
But, I spoke to President Trump for a while, and he asked me, what did we have to do to win Louisiana? And I told him, just be yourself, you're gonna tear it up.
Right.
But look, Donald Trump is the most methodical, thinking, kind-hearted man you want to meet. But he loves to get on a microphone. He loves to be himself and be the guy he is, which I love about him. Right? I think he's great. So, but if you remember, in the fall of was it 2015, 2016, when the floods happened in East Baton Rouge and West Livingston.
Yep, he was there.
And well, the reason he was there because I called the campaign, and I said, "You have got to get our candidate down here because we're being ignored by President Obama. Hillary Clinton's not going to do anything, and the people here need to know that our guy actually cares about us."
Right, exactly.
And because he does. And so they said they're going to call me back. 2 hours later, called me back and said, "We're coming. Meet us at the Baton Rouge airport tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So showed up. I had my assistant with me in the car. We got up there, and Vice President candidate Pence was there a little early with his wife and his daughter in a separate plane.
Right.
Stood on the tarmac with him for about an hour talking about stuff. And then President Trump, then candidate Trump, arrived in his private jet, landed there. We all met under the wing to get out of the sun because it was hot.
Right.
And both of them got me over there and they said, "What do you want us to do?" And this is something that I have not ever shared publicly with anybody. I've talked about this a number of times privately. Is I said, the people of this state need to know that you care about them.
Wow.
And I think you need to tell them in the simplest terms that you can that you care about them and that you love them as Americans. And that you're going to do whatever you can do to help them if you get elected. Because that's what you're supposed to do. And we went and got in the cars and we drove to Denham Springs. And between the airport in Baton Rouge and Denham Springs, we went to Tony Perkins Church and we met with Franklin Graham there. But there was not a single square inch of road that didn't have people on it waving Donald Trump.
Wow.
It was the most amazing thing. So we got there, we had a private meeting with no press, and the things that I saw that day told me that this was probably going to be one of the greatest presidents in the history of our country. I stood there, and he walked in with Mr. Pence, and there was a group of volunteers from outside the state that came to help the church.
Right.
And they asked, he said, I just want to thank you for coming and helping. I'm glad it let me know what I can do. And he told them that, and one person raised their hand, he says, "Do you mind if we come up and pray with you?" And he said, "Absolutely not." And so they came up and they formed a circle, a scrum around him and put hands on him and Pence, and they prayed. And there was not a camera in the room, and there wasn't anybody begging for a shot.
Not the
This
kids,
was
right.
it. This was it. And I knew at that moment, I knew what we had, and I knew who he was. I had always kind of known what kind of man he was, but I knew exactly what kind of man he was at that moment. So anyway, when we finished that, we went and drove around to the neighborhoods. And we looked random. We stopped, we saw people working in their house, like gutting it.
Right.
We got and went in the house. Him and Mr. Pence, they were hugging people.
Wow.
They were telling them what they needed to hear.
Exactly.
And they lifted them up, right? They lifted their spirits. And so we went to a community where what I did not know is that Mr. Trump had arranged for 2 tractor trailer loads of goods to be sent ahead. Clean up stuff, toys, things for the children. And I still to this day have the photograph of me and President Trump in the Wall Street Journal unloading the truck. And we unloaded it for the people, right?
Right.
So after it was all over and we went back to the airport and we're driving, my assistant said, got a text. He says, "You got to read this." And I read it. It said, "I just want you to know I'm watching this on television because it's been televised, the whole
Right.
thing."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Today is the day that Donald Trump became president." Right? And I said, I hope he's right. And then from that point on, I realized that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton scrambled to figure out a way to disrupt the fact that Donald Trump exposed himself as a leader. And that was what it was about. It was about him being a leader.
Is an empathetic, compassionate person.
And because he is, right? He understands that. And, he's demonstrated that in his positions on foreign policy about war. You don't want anybody getting killed. He wants peace, right? And, I don't think you can demonstrate it.
He's working hard right now. Let's talk about some hot topics.
Sure,
for a second. I want to talk about some things that sets you apart from other candidates. I want to talk about some things that decisions that you will have to make as a senator. I thought
you were going to say that I'm not as old and not as good looking.
Oh, yeah, you did.
Depends where you're looking.
Yeah, exactly.
So
this is that kind of interview, right?
Right, I know, right? So what do you want to know?
I want to talk about. Okay, let's talk about the issues of the First Amendment, Second Amendment, bureaucracy, bureaucratic agencies, downsizing, DOJ.
Well, let's start with the First Amendment.
And we're going to go into the national debt on some ideas that you would have.
Sure.
We're talking about the future for our children and then how you connect all that back to Louisiana.
Yep.
Let's talk about First Amendment.
Yep. It's there for a reason. And look at what other countries do to themselves by not having it. Look at England right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're locking people up for years for posting a meme.
Right.
This is like demonstrative of why we fought for our revolution.
Right.
And, that, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, all the components, freedom of association, our First Amendment is sacrosanct.
Right.
And especially look what they did to us when, thank God Elon Musk bought Twitter, because look what social media, when they were controlled by an authoritarian, government, decided they were going to do to us. And look, I still think the Republicans do the best memes. That's all I'm going to say. I think we're great. I think in the meme war, we are so far ahead of the curve, it's unbelievable.
If we had those kind of rules here in America that they have in England, everybody would be in jail.
Oh, it'd be terrible. We'd all, seriously, they wouldn't have room.
Yeah.
We'd be living in open prisons, right? No, but look, the First Amendment is, all words, sacrosanct. To sit there and think that we can impede people from saying what's on their mind. Look, I'm a big believer in the can't yell fire in a crowded theater issue. I'm a big believer in, being cautious about things. But in general, if people have to go before a judge and argue the position, let them do that. But at the same time, you sure can't just shut people off.
Second Amendment.
It says what it says. It's your right. And it's there to preserve the First Amendment. It's actually, people don't think about the Bill of Rights. You know why the Bill of Rights got done? Because they forgot to put it in the Constitution.
Right.
It was like, oops. They didn't think, why? Because they didn't think they needed to put the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. Because they looked at it as natural rights, guaranteed as the unalienable rights. And they thought about it and they went, you know what? People are arguing that people don't have those rights when we said they are endowed with certain unalienable rights.
Right.
And the right to self-defense, right? Which is impugned in how they crafted the Second Amendment, right? I am a massive supporter of the Second Amendment. And look, here we go. You ready? I got a gun. And I got more than one gun.
Yeah.
And I know how to use a gun. And I'm going to tell you that I have trained with the FBI through the FBI Citizens Academy. I have had FBI agents tell me, we'd sure like to have you on our team if we ever really had to do something when we did the electronic Hogan's Alley.
Right.
And a lot of people went, but I will tell you that I'm a big, I love hunting, I love fishing, but I will tell you the first thing about the Second Amendment, it's not about hunting. It's about your individual liberty to, and I love it when the left says, oh, what are you going to do, fight an F-15? Yeah, pretty much. It's about your ability to stand up to an overpowering government.
Right.
And it's your ability to stand up against invading countries.
Right.
Because there were old Russian generals that used to talk about stuff at NATO to some of our leaders and told them that they will never invade the United States. It's not that they can't invade the United States. They can get on the shore. They're just worried about the millions of guns that are in the hands of, not the Army, because they can deal with the Army. They just can't deal with us.
Right.
So,
Hide.
No, they just can't do it. Hide behind every blade of grass. No.
What about these
okay.
unconstitutional laws where they're talking about doing things with ammunition to
No,
be able to
that's-
register?
it all
I mean,
gets-
California's
No.
now trying to make ammunition something that you got to register.
And
for.
that will be undone by the Supreme Court.
Okay.
You know, here's the thing: is it's a social issue trying to undo the purity of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, right? So if they want to undo that, well, why not undo the First Amendment too? You know, where does it stop?
Right.
So understanding it. Look, I'm a believer that, you know, we should, you know, the term Minuteman has a purpose. I think we all are.
Right.
I don't think we're all obligated at some point to be ready.
But it's almost as if the people got involved more in our elections and got more involved in politics and woke up a little bit and did not allow themselves to be divided and suppressed by the media, that we would never need to get to that point, because people would be able to vote out the bad elected politicians. And
Well, I think one thing you can look at is how the government in the Biden administration went full idiot on COVID and how they impeded society.
Right.
And how they went and demeaned people's individual rights. And I think that made people lose it. And I think that it started the groundswell of we're going to get back.
Right.
And I think that, you know, maybe that's what it took for people to recognize that we needed to stand up and stand up for ourselves.
Fourth Amendment. We got you know, the government and corporations are finding ways to be able.
You mean about the Commerce Clause?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, problem with the Commerce Clause is how the courts interpret it. You know, and I think that it's you know, it's when they want it to be one way, it can be one way. They don't want it to be one way. It's the greatest malleable amendment, and I think that in all certainty, that the government needs to do it for the purposes of protecting society, but when they do it for things that are better left to the states to deal with, I think they need to...
Unreasonable search and seizure.
Yeah, well, look, that's why they have courts, and that's why they have judges, and that's why there's...
Well, the reason I'm bringing that up is we live in a society now where, you know, there's cameras everywhere,
Sure.
there's listening devices, and there's cameras.
Well, I mean, you know, look, if they see probable cause, that's right. But, you know, probable cause is the great questionable, what is probable cause, right? And a judge, you know, has to determine, did a police officer have probable cause by plain sight? Is
Right.
it something that gave notice? Did he hear someone scream? I mean, there's a long list of exceptions that'll give you instantaneous access to engage. But people who twist the sort of facts to do that demonstrates why reasonable warrants do that. But you don't need warrants for everything.
Right.
There's that sort of call now is, where's your warrant? Where's your warrant?
Yeah.
Well, no, if someone is a clear definition of breaking the law, you don't need to see somebody rob a liquor store and say, okay, I got to go get a warrant to arrest them. I mean,
Well, I'm worried more about the rise of AI and cameras and all these other things that the government having access to our lives more.
Well, the problem is with AI, you engage in it of free will. Now, there are AI systems that are coming out now which are private, right? They've already said that they're going to limit, there is no interaction. A lot of things like ChatGPT and Grok and things like that, you're actually training it, right? You're educating it, and it is publicly helping other people, right? So they're using you as the teacher, right? But there are other ones that I'm reading about now that are more about being a system that will always be just your information, right? It's basically your sealed mindset, right?
Right.
And the issue about cameras is, I mean, look, there's public area, right? But someone coming in, if you got cameras in your house, and somebody accesses cameras in your house to get a warrant, well, they got to have probable cause.
Right.
But you got to have judges who understand this kind of stuff.
What about those cameras that they have in bathrooms now? The ones that you see in the toilets and
The ones that people do that just for fun, for their
well,
sick fun.
I jokingly, this is kind of a joke, but I'm kind of, and I knew you would have something funny to say about it, but there is some truth to it. You know, where when you go to the bathroom now, they got the sensors, and I always call them cameras.
Oh,
you know,
you mean on the auto flushes?
Yeah, on the auto flushes.
Yeah.
You know, but
I'm not. As long as they're not cameras, and as long as I don't have to put my hands on stuff in there to touch it to flush, I'm
yeah.
kind of happy with that. But you know, your question is how far does technology go, right? You know, how far will it go?
How far can we be allowed as a government, as representatives of that government, to allow technology to go that would infringe on the rights of people?
This is one of those ones where how lazy do you think people are?
Extremely.
Well, that's the issue is, you know, people would love to have automated everything, right?
Right.
You know, there was a book I read, and I can't remember the title of it. It was about the future of nano systems. And it was like a guy talked about developing a device which was the size of a microwave oven. And basically, you just put a gallon of the nano particles in a reservoir of it, and you would just punch in what you wanted, and it would manufacture it for you from the nanoparticles. So if you wanted a turkey, if you wanted a hamburger, if you wanted meatballs, it would just create it from the nanoparticles. This is this conceptual idea of how nanotechnology was going to, you know, drive itself into the future. Yeah. And the thing is I think I'd rather go to the store and buy some hamburger meat and make myself a hamburger.
Right.
But there will be people who will go, I would like to punch a button and have a nanoparticle turn into a hamburger. And it's not because of anything other than that'd just be way easy, wouldn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So there are people who are just going to go for the easy way out, you know, and they don't really care about their rights, about anything.
Right.
And there are other people who are going to go, I know people and you know people
right.
who won't even have a cell phone, right? Because they don't want anybody knowing what they're doing, they're tracking me, you know. So we know people who are hyper-vigilant, and we know people who are non-vigilant, and we know people in the middle, right? But what will technology bring us, right? I think that about 90% of most AI systems are there to help the government develop basically warfare development. I think really 10% of it.
Hopefully not warfare against the people.
No, I think it's there to develop mechanisms for warfare against our enemies.
Let's about shrinking the size of government. Are you a less government guy, a Doge guy? You know, are you?
I'm a one step at a time guy.
Okay.
I think Doge first because it's easy to get rid of waste and that shrinks stuff automatically. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, I'm really okay with shrinking the size of government. You know, when Jimmy Carter was president, the Democrats used fear, and so to create large swaths of government, right? And you know, I can't remember which one that Reagan did, but Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education. Education is the closest thing at home. People need to be able to walk in public education and voice their opinion. I'm a big believer in the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, where the man stands up and voices his opinion at the public meeting, right? And the same thing needs to be about the school board. You can't go to the State Department of Education and voice your opinion.
Right.
You sure can't do it at the federal department.
I mean, they're trying to get rid of it at a local level too.
Right. And so my theory about this is all education should be local. Education should be let the money follow the child. I think the child tax credit should be higher, and it should be a mechanism where the parents decide everything. It's really, as a guy I have 2 adult children, but I was fortunate enough, I went to public school and private school. I did both at different times. Although they probably would have been happier if I just went one time, right? But I truly believe that I'm fortunate to have been able to provide that for my children because I made the choices. I took their consideration into time, but yeah. I made those choices. I don't want the government making choices for families because it also does not provide for what I would look at the best performing schools, because when schools know that they're going to get the money if they perform well, then they're going to improve. So I feel strongly about let the money follow.
Competition.
Competition is
competition in everything in life is always.
I'm going to go with it on education. Right.
Medicaid fraud.
Medicaid fraud is something that people need to be prosecuted. I'm happy on Medicare that they were able to find the people over 120 and the millions of those that I think a lot.
There should be a cap at 110, right?
Well, I'm going to tell you a couple of things about this. I think Medicare has probably been stabilized a little bit by wiping out people who were taking it and not doing it. And most of that money was going overseas anyway. Because when I'm actually on Medicare, and when you go to pay your Medicare bill, which I did today, it asks you what country you're in. And you go down the list. It's got every country in the world. You could be anywhere and be on Medicare if you were originally on Medicare here, in case you want to be somewhere else, right? So this should tell you something ingrained in that, right? But if you are Medicaid, we put people in prison for Medicaid fraud, particularly doctors who would send the van around town and pick people up and bring them in and just run them through the mill, right? But I think that we have to look at how we're going to support Medicare and Medicaid and even Social Security in the future if we don't build our population properly, right? Because our efforts of reducing our population, through whatever mechanism you want to talk about, and I agree with Elon Musk about this, we need to build our population, right? The Democrats want to build our population through illegal immigration. We should be building our population by encouraging family growth, right? Because it's good for society and it's good for us, and we need to do this. Because if we're not putting people into the system, then the system is eventually going to go away. So we can either fund it through tariffs, we can fund it through something through the Sovereign Wealth Fund that's being developed. But we're in a position where we have to make sure that there is no fraud or abuse in it. But at the same time, we've got to do something else. One of the things I'd like to see done, and I will bring legislation on this, is to offer a tax credit to the middle and upper income people in our country who have made money their lives, but who don't really need to take their Social Security check. They just take it because they earned it. And they could give it back to the system, but get a tax credit for what they would have had. So they could take it off of that.
That's a unique idea.
And so I won't take credit for it. My dad thought of that years ago, but he never could get anybody to listen. Well, I tell you, I kept my ears open.
That's right.
So I listened. And I think it's a smart idea because there are so many boomers that have been so successful that they are in a position to where they don't need to take the money.
National debt. What would you do about national debt?
I think that we talked about it earlier is I would work with the president on, really establishing the tariff mechanism and, blending it with how we balance the import mechanism and get our growth in the country going to where we can balance that equation to where we can drive the debt reduction curve down from like that 65-year mark down into the 30-year mark, because that'll help us more rapidly reduce the debt.
Because now we're taking the burden off of our grandchildren,
right?
Leaving it,
give it to our kids, right? And also, you think about this is by doing that, we also accelerating, development, because right now we're at a low of housing development, right? So, and I think the president's 100% right on the issues associated with the Federal Reserve on establishing the correct interest rates. We do need to reduce them, and that will spur housing development. It'll spur automobile sales. It'll spur a lot of things.
Right.
Right. That means the economy grows, and it'll be more than 4.5%. And if we can kick it up in maybe 5.5 or 6%, 6.5%, 15 to 20% tariffs,
right,
and a GDP managed at imports and keeping them down around 10% or maybe even less, and we drive that curve down from 65 years to 35 years, and the curve goes down more rapidly. So after really about 10 years, you start seeing a decline in the debt, and that changes the dynamic value of the dollar.
What's interesting is you're running for Senate, but you've got a vast knowledge of things that are going on, not just in energy sector we talked about earlier, but you've got a vast knowledge of all the things and how they're interconnected in DC and policy and debt and every. I mean, like you've got a lot of knowledge here.
Well, I kept my ears open.
Yeah.
I listened to my dad, right?
Yeah.
No, for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of people just don't understand what the Public Service Commission does, right? We think it's about, oh, power's out. Well, okay. We spend an enormous amount of time dealing on the complexity of finance and bonding and finance and assessment of the world of New York and the money markets and trying to accomplish that. So, when we're doing that, we engage. I spent a week in New York last spring with all of the major money houses talking about the future of power generation. Talked to J.P. Morgan and Moody's and all the bond houses about where we're going and what we've got to do, right? So we engage on these issues, and we're well deep into this. I spent 2 weeks ago, I was at a national meeting in Boston and spent 2 hours with J.P. Morgan talking about the future of AI and how we need to power it and how Louisiana is leading the way with us not making our consumers pay for the power plants.
So you're able to take the Public Service Commission that you've got, experience you've got, and your knowledge of energy nationwide, but focus it on a local level. So as a senator, you'll be able to take those connections at DC because you already got the connections. Like this isn't something that the connections you have now aren't like other candidates might have to be. They're gonna have to make those connections. Right. You already have those connections.
Well, I do, and look, I am not one-dimensional. I'm just going to tell you. I think a lot of people I engage with a lot of people in Washington already. And to be perfectly frank, look, I've been practicing law for 40 years. And, even though I was only admitted to the bar 40 years in October, the Supreme Court allowed me to be a practicing attorney in my last year of law school. I was a public defender in Baker, Louisiana, while I was a third-year law student.
Oh, I didn't know.
So I've been practicing law 40 years and a half.
How did the Supreme Court allow you to do that?
We had a program in law school that allowed students to be defense attorneys, that if they had certain grades, and I was number 4 in my class, and so I automatically made the cut, and so I went into the program, and I was able to be given permission from the Supreme Court to go and be the defense attorney. So I was a public defender, which has also made me decide that I didn't want to do criminal law.
Yeah.
For the long term, anyway. But no, it was a good experience for me, and I was the public defender in Baker, and I learned a lot, right? But practicing law for 40 years, working in the industrial sector with my father, working in the seafood industry with my family, I've had a lot of experiences with plural. And it's not about one thing. So this element of, being multidimensional, right? And taking everything you've learned and being able to understand the complexity, I think what it's giving me is the ability to do one thing particularly well, which is critical thinking. And critical thinking will get you past everything. But if you can't do that, and a lot of people can't, you're going to be at the mercy of other people around you who can. So critical thinking is one thing I learned. I learned it at George Mason Law School in a summer program before I went to law school, where the professors there laid into us, and I had never really been subjected to that type of struggle for understanding what critical thinking was. And in a very short period of about 2 months, I understood the concept of critical thinking, which is why when I went to law school, I super accelerated beyond anything I'd ever done in college.
So let's talk about this. So you are conservative. We've talked about that throughout the show, but you believe in critical thinking skills. So when you go to DC as a conservative with those critical thinking skills, are you looking to represent the people of Louisiana ideologically or as a critical thinker? Or how do you blend that together to give the proper representation with your values? Because you're going to be dealing with issues that have nothing to do with conservatism, where you're going to have to either stand for values and people of Louisiana, but also the people of this country. How do you blend that together?
The answer is I don't see a difference, okay? Because number one is I recognize that I go with who brought me to the dance, okay? And I recognize that I look at the people that elected me in the Public Service Commission, right? And there's a lot of people in my district, I don't say a lot of people, but a lot of people scratch their head and wonder, what the hell did he just do? But if they look at it in the long term, we have had quite literally stability in what we've accomplished with the Public Service Commission for the last 17 years of my service. We've really found a way to make our rate structure and everything we do really work. And look at the growth we're having on an industrial basis about that. We've got $300 billion in new industrial development in Louisiana. One factor of this is that they know they can come here and get the lowest utility rates for industrials, and they can get through the process in under a year. They can't do that anywhere else in the country. So we laid the groundwork and made that fertile field for them, right? And that took critical thinking to achieve those goals, right? So I can take that to Washington, but that doesn't mean the following. And I've gotten a lot of grief about this. I don't have to cut a deal. I can say no. I don't have to do the get along. I can say no. If I'm not going to follow conservative principles, and I'm not going to go and represent the state to protect them from bad ideas, I shouldn't be going.
Right.
You know, I got to go and follow my heart. I got to go and follow my principles. But it doesn't mean that I can't bring the message of critical thought to the other side to make them listen to reason.
Right.
And I am like, I have a burr under a saddle that I will get in there and I will work people until they go. You know, after Hurricane Katrina, I've been a mediator, a certified mediator since 1989, right? When it first came to Louisiana and nicely developed it for family law, and we've applied it across the spectrum of the legal profession. And we had the Commissioner Donnellan was the Commissioner of Insurance, and he developed a program for wind carriers. They wouldn't let us do flood policy because it was a federal policy, so that all went to the federal courts, which did not work as well as our wind carrier program.
Right.
So in a period of about, call it 16, 17 months, I did near 900 mediations and put about $12 million back on the street by working between insurance companies and homeowners and making sure that these people got their money as quickly as possible and working the issues between them and sitting in rooms between insurance companies and homeowners and bringing the issue to a head and getting the people to discuss their problems and making solutions. And I took the skill set that I had there and I brought it with me to the Public Service Commission. And I do it more with the companies and the staff and our councils and drive issues. Last fall, I helped lead the way to resolve 15 cases against Entergy and ended up where we recovered about $258 million, solved 15 cases, and that caused Meta to agree to build the facility in North Louisiana. And we did it in 5 days with me and 4 people sitting at a table. And we did it through critical thinking and reasonable discussion, but not giving up on conservative principles of making sure that we looked at not making this about the public being the backbone of somebody coming to this state and doing something.
So age, I'm bringing the age up.
That's okay.
Only because
I brought it up already when I said I'm on Medicare.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, that's another one of my questions. You know, we live in a country where we're supposed to have freedom,
right?
But yet you have to sign up for Medicare at a certain age. Like the government says, no, you absolutely have to have Medicare.
Yeah, because without you being forced to, then the other people won't be able to get it. It requires full participation. You know, it's a strange little system, but you know, it's part of what effectively is a government pension system that was created by the government.
So it's almost like Social Security.
It's the same thing.
Everybody has to participate, but without it, the algorithms don't work.
It's why I think it's interesting that people say we need federal medicine programs. I said, we got them. You know,
Yeah.
we already got them.
Right.
Like I said, we got Medicare, we got Medicaid, we have them. It's just that, you know, how we look at how they're expanded in the participation element in them. You know, and I'm like you, is that, you know, how do we look at insurance? And how do we look at the element of insurance, especially in health insurance, and all other insurance factors, you know? And so I think the federal government and the country is going to have to look at how it, you know, should it still be exempt from Taft-Hartley? And should it, you know, or should it be subject to competition?
So let's talk about age again. I know we
Sure.
brought that up a minute ago.
Yeah,
We kind of talked about Medicare and everything.
fine.
But you know, of course, there's other candidates, and there's
Well,
you know,
I
there's
agree.
some candidates that have age on them, and there's some candidates that are young, and they're you know, they got some other appeals. But I think that from this interview, you brought to the table your knowledge of things. But let's talk about age and how you think that's gonna. And I'm gonna give you my opinion in just a second.
Well, I could be the youngest person ever to get on Medicare, right?
Right, exactly. There you go.
Look, I don't make any bones about it. I'm 66 years old, but I firmly believe that I can serve 3 terms in the United States Senate. And I've served 3 terms at the Public Service Commission. And there are a lot of people who tell you, because there's 6-year terms as a senator, there's been 6-year terms as a Public Service Commissioner. It's unusual to go beyond 2 terms as a Public Service Commissioner. You know, 12 years is a long time.
Right.
Right? And look, I felt like I've been very fortunate in my life, and I wanted to dedicate my life as what I could in public service, right? And public service brought me to do this. I mean, I'm where I am with the Public Service Commission. But I think I have more to offer my community and my state, and I think I can bring value to my community and my state. Now, being 66, well, my dad lived to be 90, and he did a lot of stuff to make sure he didn't live past 90. He broke his back without knowing it by lifting heavy things. He had something like 18 different cracked vertebrae in his life. He had terrible problems with his back.
So you're saying you inherit some good genes?
I think we got lots of good genes. My mother, you know, did fine. My cousin right now is 90 years old, you know, and he's the smartest. He's
But
brilliant.
you're bringing experience with
yeah.
with a youthful.
I don't need a learning curve. I mean, obviously, there's a lot to learn on the basic rules, and I get that. Because, look, the senators get a staff in excess of about 100 people. You're going to have a lot of people working for you. You have to manage the staff, right? And a lot of that is that. You got people working in the state. You got people working in D.C. You're going to be working a lot of people in districts. So you're going to have to manage people, right? And understanding that you can't be one-dimensional. I just don't believe you can do it. You know, and I think that the fact that I'm not one-dimensional allows me to be a better choice, simply because I've had so much experience, you know, and I've gone beyond that. I've worked in dozens of countries for my father before I ever went to law school. Even after I went to law school, I've worked all over the world. Worked in, like, I go down the list and I'll just bore you with the places I've worked. So I've experienced a lot of cultures and engaged in a lot of concepts of industrial development, a lot of concepts on how cultures work, really understanding the difference between America and the world. And so, you know, when you go to Washington and you participate as a United States Senator, you know, they call it the Club of 100, but really what you're doing is you're forming the policy, the foreign policy, the economic policy, the national policy of our country. So look, am I going to be the best guy for developing energy policy? Absolutely. With no doubt whatsoever, I'll blind them with science, right? But what I will tell you is, I think I'm also going to be the most well-rounded person. And I think being well-rounded is critical, because I've got more experience in general than anybody. I've been in office longer, other than the current senator. I've been in office longer than the other candidates all put together. In cumulative, I've been in office 17 years. And my full breadth of experience in politics goes on for much longer. So interacting across the board with everyone, I think provides me with, again, that depth of knowledge and experience, and interacting with numerous people from around the world, that allows me to be I would say an exceptional and unique choice for the United States.
What I really like is that you don't say, you said a real key thing for me. You don't have a learning curve. Now, of course, Cassidy doesn't have a learning curve. Fleming could say he doesn't have a learning curve. I'm not trying to name names. I'm just saying, and then Miguez is on a state level. But you actually have actually been working in the trenches already with the same thing that senators work on a national level, and especially when it comes to energy. So you have zero learning curve.
Look, we've been working the issues, right? We've been working the problems, and the problems across the spectrum, right? Whether it's regulatory problems, whether it's energy problems, whether it's any aspect you can think of that we deal with on a national level, nuclear issues, waste repositories, impediments to where did all of our taxpayer money go with Yucca Mountain? We've been fighting that thing for 17 years, right? The Harry Reid special, right? About, let's build it. Let my friend build it. Oh, it's finished? Okay, now let's close it, right? We spent billions of dollars on it. Where did our money go? We've been fighting these issues nonstop, and I know where we're in a position to be able to fight against this. But again, I like to think that not being one-dimensional makes me an exceptional candidate. I don't walk around saying I don't put all my letters of my degrees on my card. I don't walk around doing that. I don't walk around indicating to people on my stuff, that I'm a physician. I don't, because if I'm a physician, I'm gonna go be a physician, right?
Right.
My card says Eric Skrmetta. It doesn't say Eric Skrmetta, JD, LLM, PhD candidate. It doesn't say that, because that's relevant in a different world, right? And I like people to understand that, my job is to be there. I want to be, I think one of my dear friends in the Republican leadership calls me the harbinger. That I'm the guy on the lookout, right? And it's because I spot things. It's funny. Most of the problems that we identify in our world, I see them years ahead of it, right? And I like to say my golf game, I got a great long game. I just got to work on my short game, right?
Yeah, so you get the memory of an elephant.
Well, I do, and it's like they say, the old expression when you play golf is, drive for show and putt for dough, right?
Yeah.
And I said, well, you got to figure out how to get my putting game down, right? But we've been talking about a lot of issues, and a lot of people have come to me in our world, and they go, well, I had one person who works for a utility came up to me and he went, I remember 4 years ago, actually 8 years ago, when you slid a piece of paper across the table to me, and you said, none of this is going to work, and the paper said we need to build 4 new nuclear power plants for the state of Louisiana. And now we're about to get 2, because we need them. And we needed 4 8 years ago. And everybody's now coming to an agreement. Yeah, maybe we do need them. And we probably are going to put ourselves in a position to get 2. But it's probably going to take 10 to 12 years to get them, because we didn't do it 10 to 12 years ago, right? But the understanding the need for what our society needs and where we got to go, now I know that the real element of this is to work very diligently with other senators about showing them the pathway to success for our country, right? Because this group of 100 is more or less going to be the group of 50, right? You're right on the edge. And it's been that way since the founding of the nation. It's never been we're all together, right? It's kind of like, we're half together, right?
Right, yeah, right.
So, but I think that not only do I have the ability to appeal to the core conservative, but I think I have the ability to bring reason to the moderate and reason to the conservative opposition, to show them that there are pathways, to show them that we need to bring back all the American pharmaceutical companies that are in China, that are in joint ventures with the Chinese military. We need to bring them back to the United States. We need to have them jump the tariffs. We need to build pharmaceutical companies. The president came out the other day and said we need to build stockpiles of emergency medical supplies in case we need them. Well, he's right. But you know what's better than building a stockpile? Building a factory that makes them. And then you could amp up production, right? We need to reauthorize the Defense Production Act comes in September, and we're going to do it. But you know what we need to do? We need to utilize it where it best be utilized to create the methodology of building out what's necessary for our country. When we needed a bunch of respirators, we kicked it off and built a lot of respirators. Whether they were right to build them or not, we built them. But the fact is, we can put our country on a war footing, whether it's for a war or whether it's a war for economy. We can put ourselves in a position to achieve our goals. And, you know, I like to think that the president has taken step one with the tariffs. Because now I met with a South Korean shipbuilding company that wants to come to Louisiana and talk about building a shipbuilding company here. We were very instrumental in working with the steel company that is coming to Louisiana because they came here mostly for power resources. And, you know, the state made it very attractive to them to come here. You know, we're super big on LNG exports. That's a natural expression of what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. But we've got to turn that into vertically integrated manufacturing. We got all the building blocks to make stuff, and then we send it to other places to make it. Well, guess what? We need to start making the stuff that they make in other places from our stuff and make it here.
I'm going backwards for 1 second.
Sure,
on the age thing.
Yes, I'm 66.
But no. Well, no, because I want to bring up something like,
sure.
Because, you know, conservative people are always talking about we need term limits. You know, but yet there's a lot of those same conservative people are saying we need somebody who's really young in there so they could be in there forever and get leadership and get seniority. And I'm going, wait a minute, you can't yell about term limits on one hand and then say you want somebody to be in there forever on the other hand. You're almost saying, hey, look, I'm going to bring all my experience in there, give you a couple of really good, excellent terms for our 3 year, three terms
I think
for our country, yeah. and you know, and be able to say after that, you're almost like self-term limiting yourself out.
Well, I'm going to self-term limit myself. Look, my father lived until he was 90, and he was not in great health at 90 because of physical, it was of his back. But, you know, and so it just kind of worked on him. But, you know, I'm in great health. I'm 66 years old for the third time.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure you didn't miss that. But I firmly believe that I've done 3 terms now, and I can easily do 3 terms, you know, moving forward. That can't be said for other candidates, right? But other ones can do more if they, you know, but you know, just because they can do a term doesn't mean they can do it well, right?
Right.
And so that's the significant differential. So I believe that, I think that the public would be better served by having a person such as myself provide 3 excellent terms as a United States Senator and lay the pathway for someone to see what someone can do if they throw their shoulder to the wheel with knowledge, with experience, and show to the public that, you know, people who have experience levels like me and education that, you know, it's kind of like all over the place like me, right?
Yeah.
But it's more about the will and the desire to do something right for my country, right? And for my state. Because at this point, when you go to the U.S. Senate, it's not all about the state, it's about your country, but you got to know who brought you to the dance.
Right.
So
I love it.
Right. But like I said, I think I'm a strong, youthful 66, and I'm pretty vibrant about stuff. And, you know, I've got, one day you'll talk to lawyers I deal with and stuff, and I got a good, solid reputation as being the one that nobody messes with because I always outthink them, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to be that guy in Congress. I want to be the senator that is as respected as John Kennedy. I want to be the one that they understand that nobody's going to come to me and pull the wool over my eyes and try to tell me something, because my dad always told me that you can tell the difference between things by the smell and by the taste. And so I believe that I know and have the experience to make sure that I can do the best job for the public, and especially the citizens of Louisiana.
2 final questions.
Sure, bet.
You know what I ask everybody, where we're losing freedom in America is going to be your last one. But is anything funny you want to share? Any funny story that you can think of that's happened to you in politics that just kind of shows maybe some, you know?
I'm not sure the statute of limitations is run.
Oh.
No, I think the saddest, funniest thing ever happened to me is I was playing football on the lawn of the governor's mansion with Governor Treen, and he told me to go out for a pass, and I ran out because I was in spectacular shape when I was in college. And I went out, caught the ball, turned around, and I ate a fire plug, and it knocked me out. And I ended up looking at the sky. I woke up looking up and seeing a state trooper going, "Where am I?" And he goes, "Well, at least you're not dead." And I ended up having an imprint of a fire plug on the inside of my leg for about a week.
Oh.
So, it's the little things you remember. That and riding an elephant at the governor's mansion when Dave Treen was governor. They actually brought an elephant to the governor's mansion, so that was fun.
Yeah, spend some time there.
They brought the real one.
I love it.
It wasn't Peanut.
It wasn't Peanut. Yeah, for all those in Louisiana who know who Peanut is.
Peanut is a fiberglass full-size elephant that belongs to our Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser.
So where are we losing freedom? As our final question of the show, where are we losing freedom in America, in your opinion?
It's the federal government's creep against federalism. It's definitely the deep state's creep on states' rights, and we need to do something about it. We need to make sure that the states step up and do their jobs, and we need to tell the federal government, "Thank you very much, we got this covered." And I think that the president's concept about minimizing FEMA and providing the states with the revenue and making the states step up and deal with their costs associated with storms and disaster, et cetera, I think is a gateway to understanding the reduction of the federal government's kiss their ring kind of concept, right? Because I think that's important. But I think that it's been that way quite literally from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? And so our failure as citizens, and I say it as citizens because it's all our fault, it's everybody's fault, is that we've allowed the federal government to accomplish their mission through mission creep. And we step back and let it go because we tend to be lazy. And if it, ooh, that seems yummy, and then we get hooked on it and we don't think about there were better ways to accomplish these tasks.
Right.
So I do think that, the mission creep of the federal government and impeding federalism is one of the singular greatest potential problems we have.
Love the answer. That's awesome. Eric, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Glad to do this with you.
Well, I appreciate that, the time. I'm wishing you lots of good luck on the campaign trail.
Look, this is going to be, I think the one thing I want people to understand is, this election is about me letting people know who I am and what I'm going to do. The rest of it, look, this is all in God's hands. Yeah. I got a belief in one big thing. Your number's in the book. It doesn't matter what you do. You can skydive, you can snow ski, you can sit in a chair, but your number's up, your number's up. So don't look at me and go, "Oh my God, how long is he gonna go?" He's gonna go until the page comes up, right? But I firmly believe that, this election's got to be about us maintaining the seat for the Republicans, number one. I think it's got to be about us remembering that party loyalty is a priority. And that I got to think that what we need to do is just everybody tell us what we've done. Everybody tell them what we've done to make ourselves better Republicans. And I think once we do that, and we understand the capacities of each person to demonstrate what they bring to the table and what they've done in their positions, because they're all elected officials running, I think except one or two people.
Right.
I think they look at us and they'll go, that person did more with less and accomplished the most.
I love it. Thank you very much again.
Sure.
And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning into the show, and please share this interview with somebody you think might need to know more about Eric on a local level and even on a nation level, please share the podcast. Thank you so much for your time.